D4VD's landlord stood in the parking lot long before anyone realized a crime had taken shape, watching stall number 7 like a man guarding something more valuable and more dangerous than a car. D4VD had always kept a low profile in the apartment complex, known more through his online presence than through any personal interaction with his neighbors. The place he rented was modest, tucked in a clean corner of the property, managed by a landlord with a reputation for maintaining absolute control over every detail. Nothing went unnoticed under his watch. Each tenant was required to follow the rules precisely, and any deviation was recorded. For months, everything followed the usual schedule. Noise complaints were handled immediately, late rents were confronted quickly, and the landlord inspected the grounds almost obsessively every morning. It was this strict structure that made what followed even more unsettling. One tenant, a quiet figure who rarely interacted with anyone, had moved in without drawing attention. Neighbors remembered seeing them arrive with only a few belongings and a black Tesla that always parked in the same stall. They kept to themselves, never joining in casual greetings or friendly gatherings. This silence was accepted in a community where privacy was valued, and the landlord never raised concern as long as payments were on time. Then, without warning, small signs began to surface. A delivery driver left multiple packages at the tenant's door over several days, and none of them were collected. The lights inside the unit remained on continuously, casting a pale glow through the curtains at odd hours. Neighbors began to notice that the Tesla, usually clean and carefully positioned in its spot, had accumulated a thin layer of dust. Subtle tension crept through the complex. People spoke in low voices in the hallway, glancing toward the tenant's door as if expecting someone to appear. The landlord, accustomed to order, made a note of every irregularity but chose not to act immediately. He believed in handling issues quietly to avoid drawing unnecessary attention from authorities or media. However, a strange chemical smell was reported near the parking area one morning, faint but unusual enough that a few residents stepped back with unease. The landlord dismissed the concern publicly, but investigated it privately, noting that the scent was strongest near the Tesla in stall number 7. As the days passed, the absence of the tenant shifted from a minor curiosity to a pressing concern. The landlord stood near the parking lot during his inspections a little longer each day, keeping his gaze fixed on the still vehicle. Something was clearly out of place, but he made no announcements. Instead, he began planning his response quietly, driven by a determination to keep control over whatever situation was developing within his property. The black Tesla in stall number 7 became the center of quiet speculation among the tenants. It had always been parked with precision, its glossy surface reflecting the lines of the covered parking structure. Now, it sat untouched, its once clear windows slightly fogged, and its screen inside faintly lit even when no one approached it. The dashboard glow during the night created an eerie sight, as if the vehicle was still awake while everything else had gone still. The landlord took note of the number of days it had remained in the same position, jotting the time and condition of the vehicle in his personal records. He believed every object on his property had a routine, and any break in routine signaled a problem. The landlord's security cameras covered every angle of the lot, and he reviewed the footage late at night in his office. The last recorded activity around the Tesla showed it being accessed in the early hours of the morning several days earlier. The door opened briefly, a figure entered, and the lights inside flickered before going dark. There was no footage of anyone exiting the vehicle afterward. For someone else, this might have been enough reason to alert authorities immediately, but the landlord viewed external involvement as a disruption to the order he worked so hard to maintain. Instead, he issued a notice for vehicle removal due to extended inactivity, a rule he enforced without exception. This notice, placed under the windshield wiper, remained untouched for 2 days. The silence surrounding the vehicle only made it more noticeable. Residents passing by on their way to work began walking a bit faster when they crossed stall number 7, avoiding eye contact with the car as though it held something best left undisturbed. The landlord contacted a towing contractor, instructing them to arrive discreetly to avoid raising unnecessary alarm. He intended to handle the matter as a standard policy enforcement, yet his careful tone during the call suggested he suspected more than just a simple parking violation. A few tenants reported seeing him standing near the Tesla the evening before the tow was scheduled, observing it closely without making any move to touch it. He circled it like an inspector examining something fragile, his expression locked in a controlled seriousness. He noticed the moisture trapped inside the windows, the stale air pressed against the glass, and the faint chemical scent growing stronger. Without revealing his thoughts, he logged the time once again, then stepped away with a decision forming silently in his mind. The towing contractor arrived early in the morning, rolling in quietly as instructed, with no flashing lights and no unnecessary noise. The landlord was already waiting, standing beside the Tesla with his clipboard in hand, appearing like a man confirming a routine procedure. However, his posture was unusually tense. He requested that the contractor pause before attaching any equipment. He wanted to look inside the vehicle first. This was not standard protocol, but the contractor, accustomed to his strict methods, agreed without question. The landlord reached for the door handle, and to his surprise, it opened without resistance. The fact that such an expensive vehicle had been left unlocked sent a clear signal to him that something was deeply wrong. The interior felt heavy, as if the air inside had been trapped for days without circulation. The smell that had lingered around the vehicle now surrounded them more clearly, no longer faint or ignorable. In the back seat, a thick tarp had been hastily laid across the upholstery, its edges tucked down as if to conceal something. The landlord did not lift it. He simply stood still for a long moment, eyes fixed on the covered area, while his mind measured the weight of the situation. A tow would draw attention, and attention would bring authorities, reporters, and questions he might not be ready to answer. Instead of proceeding with the tow as scheduled, he made a sudden decision that surprised even the contractor. He ordered the vehicle to be moved, but not to an impound lot. He had a private storage facility, rarely used and registered under a secondary business name. He directed the contractor to transport the Tesla there instead. It was an unusual request, but he presented it with such authority that it sounded like a carefully planned procedure rather than a spur-of-the-moment choice. Tenants watching from their windows saw the vehicle being taken away, but received no explanation. Some assumed the landlord was enforcing parking policies again, while others felt something was off about the way the vehicle was handled with such guarded precision. The landlord followed the tow truck in his own vehicle, maintaining a fixed distance as though escorting something valuable yet dangerous. At the storage unit, he directed the Tesla to be placed inside and locked the large metal door himself, keeping the key in his jacket pocket. From the outside, it looked like a simple act of enforcement, but beneath it was something far more deliberate, guided by a quiet sense of control and an unspoken fear of losing command over the unfolding mystery. News of the missing tenant finally reached local authorities when a relative filed an official report. After multiple failed attempts to make contact, investigators began tracing the tenant's last known movements, quickly connecting the address to the apartment complex. They arrived with questions, expecting a simple welfare check, but instead found a landlord who had already moved a key piece of evidence off-site without informing anyone. Their interest shifted immediately from a disappearance to a potential cover-up. The landlord presented himself formally, insisting that his actions were meant to prevent chaos on the property and protect tenants from distress, but investigators noted the calculated nature of his decisions. Every step he took seemed designed to maintain control rather than seek help. The discovery that the Tesla had been relocated to a private storage facility raised immediate suspicion. Officers secured a temporary order to access the vehicle, and a forensic team was dispatched to the location. The storage unit, isolated behind a row of locked garages, held the vehicle exactly as it had arrived. There were no signs of tampering, and the landlord had ensured it remained untouched, even placing his own security camera above the unit. His careful documentation of every move created an unusual situation where he appeared both suspicious and strangely helpful. Investigators noted that while his decision to relocate the car was questionable, his records were detailed, time-stamped, and precise, almost as if he anticipated legal scrutiny. Once the vehicle was accessed under official supervision, investigators documented the interior through photographs and scans. The tarp remained in place, untouched since the landlord first saw it. The forensic team handled it slowly, preserving every detail for analysis. The atmosphere inside the storage unit was cold and silent, except for the quiet hum of equipment being set up for evidence collection. The landlord stood outside the perimeter, observing but not speaking, his expression unreadable. He had placed himself in a position where he was neither fully accused nor entirely cleared, a figure directly in the center of a rising media storm. Word began to spread through online forums, linking the case to D for VD. Due to the notoriety of the complex he rented in, headlines speculated wildly, drawing attention to the mysterious vehicle and the landlord's unusual involvement. Cameras started appearing outside the complex, and the once quiet property became a point of public fascination. Through it all, the landlord maintained his strict demeanor, following procedures with exactness, as if convinced that only absolute order could prevent the situation from spiraling further. The investigation reached a turning point when forensic specialists submitted their preliminary report. Evidence inside the Tesla confirmed that the vehicle had been a central location in the case, and the tarp concealed items linked directly to the missing tenant. The discovery intensified public speculation, and the media quickly shaped a narrative around the landlord's actions. Many viewers believed he had interfered with evidence, while others argued that his meticulous handling had actually preserved critical details from being lost or damaged. The storage unit's controlled environment had prevented exposure to weather, contamination, or unauthorized access, something that investigators grudgingly acknowledged as useful. Despite this, moving the vehicle without alerting authorities triggered legal consequences. The landlord was questioned repeatedly about his intentions, and every answer he gave was measured. He insisted that his priority was maintaining order and preventing disruption to tenants like D for VD, whose presence on the property could have attracted and wanted attention. Authorities reviewed his surveillance logs, property records, and communication notes. His documentation was so thorough that it became part of the case file, with timestamps matching key developments. It was clear that he had predicted the chaos that would follow public involvement and had taken steps to manage it in his own controlled manner. Public opinion divided sharply. Online discussions framed him either as a man trying to prevent panic or as someone who attempted to control the crime scene for reasons still unknown. His image shifted from a strict property manager to an enigmatic figure at the heart of a high-profile investigation. The complex itself became part of the story, with people visiting the area just to see the parking stall where the Tesla had once stood. Residents grew uneasy with the attention, and some requested early termination of their leases, unable to cope with the constant presence of cameras and strangers. Authorities continued their investigation, focusing on establishing a timeline and uncovering the missing tenant's final actions. The black Tesla, now sealed in an evidence lot under official custody, stood as a symbol of the case. The landlord, though not charged with any major offense at the time, remained under legal scrutiny due to the bold decisions he had made. His choice to remove the vehicle would forever be remembered as the defining moment that shaped the direction of the Tesla body case. Long after the initial shock faded, the image of the unmoved car and the silent landlord supervising its relocation stayed in the public mind, leaving a lasting question about whether control or truth had guided his actions.